The shadow on my wall. I've always been a light sleeper. The slightest creak of the floorboards or rustling of leaves outside would rouse me from my slumber. But it was the shadow on my wall that I could never explain. Every night, as I lay in bed, I would see it, a dark, looming figure in the corner of my room. At first, I thought it was just a trick of the moonlight, but this shadow had a presence. It watched me, unmoving, night after night. I tried to dismiss it as a product of my overactive imagination, but the feeling of being watched grew too intense to ignore. I'd wake up to the sensation of cold breath on my neck, and the sound of whispered words just beyond the edge of hearing. One night, I decided to confront it. I turned on the bedside lamp, and there it was, the shadow, standing there, right beside me. I blinked, thinking it would disappear like it always did when I tried to catch it, but this time, it didn't. As the light washed over it, the shadow took shape. It had a face, pale and featureless, like a blank canvas. Its eyes, though, were dark voids that seemed to suck in all the light from the room. It grinned, a twisted, horrifying smile, and whispered my name. I screamed and jumped out of bed, fleeing from the room. I didn't return until morning. But the shadow was gone. My friends and family thought I was crazy, but I knew what I saw. It followed me, lurking just out of sight, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The mirror stalker. I've always been a little paranoid about mirrors. Call it an irrational fear, but I could never shake the feeling that someone was watching me through them. It wasn't until I moved into my new apartment that my fear became a living nightmare. The mirror in my bathroom had an odd, antique quality to it. It was old, and the glass was slightly warped, distorting my reflection in unsettling ways. But what truly terrified me was the figure I saw standing behind me in the mirror. Every time I glanced at the mirror, there it was, a shadowy figure lurking just out of view, its eyes fixated on me. I'd whirl around, but there was never anyone there. My heart raced, and I started avoiding the bathroom altogether, using the mirror in my bedroom instead. But it didn't stop there. The mirror stalker followed me. It showed up in reflective surfaces all over my apartment. Windows, glass cabinets, even my phone's screen. I could feel its malevolent presence, watching, waiting. One night, as I lay in bed, I heard a whisper, faint but unmistakable. It was my name, spoken softly from the hallway. Trembling, I peeked out, but there was no one there. Just the open bathroom door with the eerie, antique mirror reflecting the darkness beyond. I knew I couldn't run from it any longer. With trembling hands, I approached the mirror and stared into its warped glass. There it was, the stalker, right behind me, its face contorted into a grotesque grin. And it reached out from the mirror, its fingers stretching towards me. I screamed and shattered the mirror with a heavy candlestick. The stalker's grin twisted into a scream as the glass splintered, and I watched in horror as it was sucked back into the shards. I quickly covered the broken mirror with a cloth, vowing never to uncover it again. But to this day, I can't help but feel its presence, lurking in every reflective surface I encounter. waiting for the moment when it can escape once more. The unseen follower. I used to live in a quiet neighborhood where everyone knew everyone else. It was the kind of place where people left their doors unlocked and kids played in the streets until the sun dipped below the horizon. But something changed when he moved in. I first noticed him one evening. I was taking out the trash. He stood across the street, partially hidden by the thick foliage of a tree. I couldn't see his face, but his presence was unsettling. He didn't wave or acknowledge me. He just stood there, watching. From that day on, I would spot him everywhere on my way to work, at the grocery store, even outside my bedroom window. He was always there, always watching. I tried to convince myself that I was being paranoid, that he was just a neighbor going about his business, but his presence grew increasingly sinister. One night, as I was getting ready for bed, I heard a faint noise coming from the hallway. I tiptoed out, and there he was, standing in the shadows. His face was obscured by a hood, but I could feel his malevolent gaze piercing through me. I screamed and called the police, but by the time they arrived, he was gone. They assured me they would keep an eye on the neighborhood, but there was nothing they could do, without concrete evidence of wrongdoing. I became a prisoner in my own home, constantly looking over my shoulder, afraid to go out after dark. But no matter how vigilant I was, he always seemed one step ahead. He never made a move, never threatened me directly, but his presence was suffocating. One night, unable to bear it any longer, I confronted him. I stepped out onto my porch and shouted, "Who are you? Why are you following me?" He just stood there, unmoving, and then, in a voice like nails on a chalkboard, he whispered, "I am always with you." That was the last straw. I packed my bags and left that neighborhood, never looking back. But even now, in my new home, I can't shake the feeling that he's still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike.